Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's live episode begins with the question. Oh, sorry. What is imposter syndrome and why does it matter? My name is Glenn Gers. I am the Chief Operating Everything here at Writing for Screens, a channel in which I am taking the skills, tools, and insights that I had to figure out for myself in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business, I am leaving behind everything I know here on this channel here's a screen grab of the channel, here's a screen grab of the first three playlists as you scroll down. They are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These three playlists have about 50 10-minute videos. I call them the lesson videos because each one is a lesson on a specific topic. Flashbacks, dialogue, character, genre, all sorts of stuff. The way you find them is there's a great big list. The headlines are very clear. The thumbnails tell you what they're about. So all you do, scroll down there, see what I have to say on that. I've tried to make it as fast, as practical, as available as possible so that you can figure out whether these ideas work for you. There is no system, there is no right or wrong. There's just you figuring out what you need to do as your type of artist for your kind of art in your kind of situation. That's what every artist has to do. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. You got to figure it out for yourself. I'm going to offer you some things I had to figure out for myself and things I learned about other people so that you have a couple of extra tools. Having done that, I also do live streams every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. That's what we're doing right now. Every time there's a different topic. Today, I'm going to start with a question that came in about imposter syndrome, and then I'm going to move on to open the gates and let people talk. Some quick hellos. Hi, Thomas. Hi, Feng. Hi, Sonia. Good to see y'all. Let's get right into it because then we can open up the questions. Here's the deal. I got a question this week, which I am going to read to you part of. It is, what is an imposter syndrome? Why do many writers on the web feel like they have it? Is that some sort of trophy or badge that we unlock once we've worked hard enough? That's a fascinating question. And at first I thought, well, I'm not a psychologist. This is not medical advice. I do not necessarily have expert answers, but I did think, what does this have to do with writing? Because so many writers do talk about having this feeling. So I'm going to tell you what I think it is and how I think it applies to writing in case that's of use to you. Here's the deal. I believe that the definition for imposter syndrome, if you're just trying to keep it simple, especially regarding writing, is the fear that you are not good enough. It's just that. Which when you are starting out, when you haven't done anything, that fear simply makes you not do things. It makes you stop and hesitate and get afraid. So you don't do stuff, or you feel like, oh, well, I'm clearly bad. I'm a failure. And that's because I'm not good enough. The thing is, if you actually get past that and do something, if you write a script and someone likes it, and you still have the feeling I'm not good enough, the only way that your mind can reconcile the fact that you have some form of success or accomplishment with the feeling that you're not good enough is to think, I'm not really good enough. I've tricked them. There's been a mistake. I've fooled them in some way, but sooner or later, they're going to find out. I'm going to fall. And this is a fascinating, very, very common feeling. It is very easy, as the questioner asked, to think that these people are just asking for reassurance. It's almost like humble bragging. The idea that it's like somebody who has made it, and then they say, I have imposter syndrome, I feel bad. And you just want to kind of slap them and say, hey, you made it. What's your problem? You did it. But the thing is, this is a very, very real thing. And some people feel it a lot, debilitatingly, paralyzingly. And I guess that what we want to talk about with this, for those of you who have it or those of you who don't, is what I think is fascinating is how much it shows you how wrong fear can be. Okay, because you've got a case where you fear that you're not good enough, but you are good enough. You have proved that you are good enough in some way. Maybe it's just writing a script that other people said is good, or getting a job, or having some form of success. But even if you don't, your fear is saying, you're bad, with no evidence. If you're feeling you're bad before you have written, that's crazy talk, because who knows if you're good or bad? How can your fear know that? So what I'm getting at is that I believe that essentially imposter syndrome is fear trying to cope with its own irrationality. It's like fear actually isn't about reality. And there are certainly real things to fear, but this kind of fear that says like, oh, I judge you before you've done anything or even after you've done something, this is fear trying to make itself more important than it is. That's really what it is. In other words, fear is endangered by success. You can always, like, if you are feeling you're not good enough when you haven't done something, if you're saying this script I'm going to write will fail, that's crazy talk. You can't possibly know that. And if you have done things and you're feeling, oh, I'm about to fail, it's going to all be taken away, that's just fear saying, don't listen to the reality. Fear, and this is an important thing because you have to recognize we often think that fear is helpful. We think, oh, that fear is telling me the truth. That fear is saying that I see things that other people don't. I know better. I can tell the future. I can see that even though I'm good, I'm actually bad. Your fear tells you that you are smarter, but it's not. It's just trying to protect itself. This is the most important thing I can say about this because it's really, really true. Certainly there are real things to fear, but when you have a feeling of fear before something has happened or when in denial of something has happened, your fear is lying. Your fear is trying to change the rules to keep itself in power. That's what is going on. Obviously, the first question that you should ask when somebody says the fear that you are not good enough for what? If it's just, am I good enough to finish the script? Am I good enough to get somebody to read it and like it? These are things that you probably are good enough to do. Are you good enough to win an Academy Award? Nobody knows. Even the people who are good enough to win an Academy Award don't know until they win an Academy Award. And the truth is, there's no real way to know why someone does or does not win. So your fear saying, I know, it's lying to you. I think that the main things that people fear are that they are not good enough to be paid, not good enough to be admired, not good enough to be loved and comfortable and safe. These are things that we fear. And the fact is, let's just talk about the reality. Many people are paid and admired, and they're not really that good. We all know that. Lots of people are well paid or have high status. And when you look at them, you're just like, seriously, they're not that good. Why is that? Meanwhile, we absolutely know that there are some people who are great, who are not paid and admired. Your quality does not determine your fate. That's a lie that is told in the system because they need people to believe that they are judging fairly. Honestly, the system is not judging by what's good. The system is judging by what is good for the system, what will sell, get more clicks or subscribers or various, sell more tickets. Those are not necessarily things. Watching a train wreck will sell a lot of tickets. That does not mean that it's good. And when I say the system, what I'm talking about is those institutions and gatekeepers, which are now basically algorithms, but they are programmed by somebody, usually. that are deciding what gets promoted, what gets seen, what gets accepted, and what doesn't. That system, as I'm just calling it for shorthand, the studios, the agencies, the media, whatever it is that's deciding what the public will see as acceptable art or popular art, that's chosen by someone. The reasons that they choose and the reasons that you are doing things are unlikely to match up. So therefore, the thing is, you have to recognize that your value is not only determined by whether or not you are paid or admired or whether you feel good. Because the whole thing about imposter syndrome is it's people who have won and still don't feel safe. They still don't feel loved or comfortable. So I think the point is that fear is not actually helping you. Fear is not protecting you. Our brains are trained to think, fear is going to help me because I have to be on the alert for these bad things that could happen, these creatures that could jump out of the jungle when I'm walking through and attack me. But the truth is that therefore then your fear is saying everything is going to attack me. That's just not true. The truth is that your fear and your situation are not related. They are not. The fact that you are afraid does not mean that there is something necessarily to be afraid of. And the truth is, the things that you are afraid of, you could survive. It's not that big a deal. So what do we do about this? The first thing I would say is recognize it for what it is. See it as fear. When you feel like you have imposter syndrome, you are saying, I have fear. I am afraid that I am not good enough, even though I'm already good enough. That is absolutely obvious. Hold on. Hi, Lake Filter. Yes, absolutely. This is your question. If you want to own it, that's fine. I don't like to name the people who ask questions unless they offer it. The point is, imposter syndrome or all the other writing blocks, the things that make you not write, they are fear. And the first thing you have to do is recognize that they are not legitimate warnings. They are not honest assessments. They are just fear. And the thing is, you need to start to say, why do I feel this fear? A lot of it is honestly biochemistry. Some people just have more fear chemicals than others, and everything scares them. I know, I'm one of them. The other thing that makes you fearful, circumstances, the way you grow up, your experiences, trauma, frights, stress, training. You can be trained by your schools, by your parents, by your friends who will say, oh, you'll be humiliated if you do that thing. Oh, you can't do that thing. You'll fail. Oh, whatever. That seeps in and you go, I better listen to them. And you think, I'm afraid. The truth is, many, many people with high fear levels or huge obstacles often still do things and they manage just fine. I was listening to an interview with an actor, a famous actor who's dyslexic. I've actually heard about 3 or 4 recently. They've all said the same thing. I have a real problem being an actor because I have to read scripts and memorize them, and it's hard for me to read. But one of them said something interesting. He said, the thing is, when I do, because it is hard for me to read, when I do get the lines, when I do read them and memorize them, I've engaged with them really well. I've really got them in there. So there's often the things that we think of as obstacles or things to fear, they're also good things. There's nothing you can do about who you are. If you have that brain chemistry, if you are part of a group of people who is currently being excluded from the media, if you do not have connections into the big agencies, all of those things can really, really mean that you're going to have a hard time. But what do you do about that? What do you do about the things that we fear, even though fear is lying and cheating? Right? The first thing I would say is accept that you may not be paid or admired or loved and comforted and safe because of your work. The truth is, very often, artistic work does not make you safe. It does not make you loved. It does not make you paid, certainly. The next thing you need to do is find things that do make you feel loved and comfortable and safe that are within your control, within your abilities. Everybody's got some things that make them feel better. Store those up against the fact that art often makes you feel bad when you're doing it. That's okay. Learn to work out a system where you say, I'm going to do my writing. It's going to make me feel crappy. Then I'm going to go out and have a milkshake because that makes me feel better. It works. The other thing I think that you need to do is fight the fear. And we'll talk about that. The fight is always the same. Taking small steps, living with the feeling of bad feeling when you're trying to do something, even though it's scary, try and do it anyway. Let it be bad, but enjoy the good parts. And if you practice that experience, if you get familiar with it over and over and over, the fear does go down. And I can tell you this as someone, I used to be afraid to leave my house. When I was in middle school and stuff, I had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of my house. Slowly but surely, I learned to go out of the house, okay? It is scary, but if you accept that the worst thing you fear could happen to you, then you try and live despite that, you'll usually find you can make your way in a really, really good way. And what I would suggest is decide which fears are worth fighting. If you have a whole lot if you're like me and your fear level is just things come at you all the time, you're like, decide which ones you're just going to, you know what? Like with me, I don't know how to drive, okay? Partly because it was just too scary. Partly I lived in a city where you didn't have to drive. I grew up in New York City and having a car was actually a drag. But even when I wanted to drive, it was just too overwhelming. And I thought, is it worth it to fight that fear, to practice, to get experience? The truth was I lived in New York City. I didn't need to. And you have to decide which fears to say, you know what, I'm going to live with that. I'm going to take the bus so that I can put my energy into fighting the fear that I'm not a good enough writer by writing every day, which is what I did. The other thing I think you need to do is just remember, do not overvalue external rewards. They often don't even work. Obviously, money is nice. Sometimes the price that you have to pay for getting money from a creative work is not worth it. Your creative work gets damaged too much. Or you think you're trading off, but you never get your trade-off. You only give your part. This has happened to me. So stop valuing external rewards. They're nice if they happen, but that is not how we work. Do what you can with what you have as who you are right now. Okay, I'm going to very briefly talk about one more thing about this, and then I'm going to get to all your questions because there's a ton of questions happening. But I want to talk about this sense of failure and the things we fear. Because currently I'm trying to steer this channel in a new direction, and I'm starting a Substack where I'm really going to put my effort into the Substack. So I urge you, I beg you, please sign up, subscribe to my Substack. It's free. It's easy. All you do is you sign up, ignore all the other steps where they say, hey, what about this? And hey, what about that? It's fine. It does not cost anything. And that way you get all my new material delivered to you safely. Because YouTube has been not doing good for putting my stuff out there. All right. So I've got 40 followers on Substack right now. 40. That's not a lot. However, I happen to be watching Netflix. There's a new Claire Danes, Matthew Rice limited series called The Beast in Me. It's a blast. It's in many ways just a crazy, silly melodrama, but really well done, superbly acted. Anyway, I was thinking about this because I was watching Claire Danes, and Claire Danes was the star of a series called Homeland. I was hired to work on a series of audiobooks about Homeland. They were a promotional deal. They were trying to expand the Homeland universe, but the people who were making Homeland had very strict controls on what they would and wouldn't do, as far as press, as far as all sorts of promotional crap. And they were thinking, how do we promote? How do we make more products out of Homeland? They were going to do some books, and they were going to do some audiobooks. And so what they did was they wanted to have somebody write stories about the main characters of Homeland that fit into, that were the in-between parts of the series. So that I was hired to write 3 half-hour audiobooks that were going to be narrated by the main characters at the time. And so one of them was Claire Danes, one was Mandy Patinkin, one was, oh damn, I can't remember his name now, and he's the only one who did it. The guy who played Brody. Anyway, the point is, I worked for a year on these audio stories, and they were then submitted to Homeland. And I worked with the Homeland staff. I did not write for Homeland, but I worked with them. In other words, that they gave me the scripts, the top secret scripts of the upcoming season, so that I could fit my stories in the spaces between the parts of the story, so that they would enrich the story, but not interfere with the story. The point is, of those 3 that I wrote, only one got made. It's on Amazon. It's cool. It's called Phantom Pain. Damian Lewis, that's who did it. And he read it. It was beautiful. But Claire Danes and Mandy Patinkin didn't want to do it. It countered their understanding of what the show was for, which was, you're not going to get all this information. The suspense is not knowing about the characters. I was giving too much backstory, which was the point. Anyway, the point is, I was thinking about this because I worked, so I was rewarded, I was paid, I was admired in the sense that the Homeland staff said, hey, you're good. And the other people in the business were like, wow, he's working with Homeland. All these things, I was paid and admired. Nobody knew, okay? Nobody has ever read that work I did. Phantom Pain got out there, but the other 2 stories, which I did draft after draft, nobody has ever seen them. They are contractually locked away. You will never, ever read this work I did. I was paid for it, and I was admired, and I was in the system. So here's the thing. Is that a failure? If I was in the business, if I was working with the top of the game, if I was accepted within this, and yet, because of various systemic situations in which different parties involved contractually didn't want to do this project I was writing, it never got made. Likewise, there were scripts I've written where the script was accepted by directors, accepted by the studio, but then for various reasons didn't get made. Is that a failure? Or is it more of a failure? Is it more of a success to do something like this, where no matter what I do, good or bad or indifferent, I get out to an audience. I get out to the 30 people who are on here, the 300 who will watch it eventually. Okay, so we've got 300 people who will watch a part of this. And about 30 of you who are here right now, hi, thank you, by the way. That is completely negligible in the world. That is not enough followers, that is not enough clicks to make any difference to anyone in any industry. However, it is more satisfying and more intensely complete than even the work I did on Phantom Pain, which did get made, let alone the stuff that didn't get made. I really think that the point is that you've got to work with what you have. If what I have is this is what I'll do, and I will relish the freedom and the power and the control of the creative work that comes from it. And if you are in that situation where the business is not paying you, enjoy what you can do with what you have. Don't overvalue external rewards. That is what imposter syndrome tells us. Imposter syndrome tells us even when you get the rewards, you may feel terrified. So that was my point. That was my lesson. Went on longer than I wanted. So now I'm going to go back and say hi and answer questions. Hello. Good evening from Germany. Two good Germany football rocks. Okay. Hello, Leah. One of the luckiest followers waiting for the paperback. Oh, thank you. So I'm so glad. I'm really excited. I'm really happy about this book. Hold on. Wait a second. This book. It's there. It's me. It's everything I've got to tell you. So please do consider getting it. Oh, Michael says the book is truly a treasure. Thank you. Germany Football Rock says, I have a terrible timing at naming the characters. Every time I waste days looking at baby names before I can write the story. Is there a trick to naming characters? There isn't. But what I would suggest is when you have this problem, throw down a name, a filler name. Find the best name you can in an hour, okay? Don't spend days. Get one. You can always change it. The cool thing is it's a search and replace. You can finish your entire project and then say, you know what? They're not named Rose, they're named Linda. Search, replace, boom. It's not a problem. Don't get hung up on it. However, yes, looking at baby names, I often look at like the end credits of big movies, because the end credits there's literally 1,000 names on the end of a Marvel movie. And so here, my mic is in the wrong place. Okay. So that's what I would suggest is try looking at, if you are working in a historical period or if you're working in a particular location, do some research on what kind of names come from that time or place. But the main thing is just do it in steps. Say, I'm going to do a name, and then later I can always change the name. Okay. Good morning, Haskell. Yep, wearing my cowboy shirt. Have you watched the new movie Die My Love? No, I'm not. I'm very curious about it. Hello, Seabatharoil. Anyway, Seabath. Hi. I'm glad that you're here. I'm sorry I don't know how to say your name. The feeling that you don't belong is another way to define imposter syndrome, except the problem is the thing about imposter syndrome is very specifically that you have accomplished something, but you feel like you are still vulnerable within that. Miller Turner says, I have a similar problem. Every time when I get to around page 70, I fear it is garbage. Before I thought it was a masterpiece. Every single time at page 70 for some reason. Cool, whatever, but at least be glad you got to page 70. The main thing I would suggest, once again, is recognize that if every single thing you do, you stop on page 70 and say it's not good, it's clearly not about the thing, because they can't all be bad at page 70. That's just too coincidental. So clearly what it is essentially imposter syndrome. And like you until you've got 70 pages, you're thinking, I don't even know if I can do this. When you get to page 70, your fear can't say, oh, you're not even going to get to do it. It needs a new topic. So your fear simply moves over to this is bad, because your fear was you're not even going to do it. And the fear then has to say, well, he did it. I can't keep doing that one. I know. I'll just turn to something that we can't deny, because nobody knows if anything is good enough. That's my suggestion, Miller Turner. Hi, Next Institute. Henry Kane, Junior Henry Kane, off topic. Another screenwriting teacher, Corey Mandel, taught in his class that start with the fear of every character. I find that very interesting because it seems every Hitchcock movies do that. Yes, absolutely. Whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. The thing I have about negative ways to analyze characters is it tends to make them passive. In other words, the question is, yes, if they have a fear, what do they do about that fear? Do they go out of their way to avoid the thing they fear? Do they have to face their fear? Because what I'm finding is that if I know what the character is fear of, I don't know what they're doing. I know they flinch when it happens, but other than that, so I would say, yes, it's absolutely valuable to start with the fear of a character. It's fine to start with whatever part of the character you like, whatever gets your mind spinning. But I then try and find, what are they doing? What do they want that makes them do something even though they were afraid? Tom was an imposter. Tom. Who's Tom? Oh, you mean my Tom, my character Tom? Yes, absolutely. Paul Thomas Anderson never won an Academy Award. It's meaningless to think if we are good enough for the Academy, Watson Neal says. Yes, the list of people who have or have not won awards or are number one, number big money, big clicks, big influencers, doesn't matter. The answer is, while those are real statuses, they are not necessarily indicators of value. That's the important thing. Leah is talking about character names. One of mine is Garita Ramar from a Romanian sugar brand named Margarita. Playing with the letters. Discovered later that Garita means bastion in Spanish. Yeah, absolutely. Play with it. Do whatever you want. Do Dickensian, Mr. Grumblebug. Whatever it is that you feel cool about. Hello to Lake Filter. Thank you for the question. Jeff Messerman says, I used to be paralyzed with terror over my writing work. Then I had kids. My scripts don't seem so terribly scary anymore. Yes, absolutely. There's certainly, everyone is different. For some people, you just need to have another thing to fear more than than you're writing, and then your fear just swerves over there and lets you write. Absolutely. Sorry, I hope that you have that you're not afraid of your kids. You're more afraid for your kids. My thought, Jeff. I guess you tell me. Sanchez Pablo says, how do you deal with friends and family that don't support my writing career? They constantly say how bad my writings are, and I will never be a professional writer. Okay, are your friends and family in the business? That's the first question. If they are not, what do they know? That's just a thing. Certain communities, certain families, certain people just are negative. Just by nature. They may be, because they don't want to be, they may be threatened by the idea of someone else achieving something that they are not able to achieve. Or it could be that they are simply afraid for you, or they just have a lot riding on being defined in some other way. Whatever it is, if they don't know anything about writing, who cares what they say? I mean, obviously in a common conversation, the thing I would suggest when it comes to an actual conversation where somebody is saying, stop writing, you're going to be bad, you'll never be a professional, is to say, I'm trying the best I can. I like it. It makes me happy. It doesn't matter if I'm a professional or not, because it doesn't. It does not matter if you are a professional. Maybe you'll be a professional, maybe you won't. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be a writer. Maybe you'll write and be not professional, but have a crowd of 300 people who like your writing. Okay? If you keep putting it out there, you never know. Or you can be a professional like me and no one reads it. Okay? I have written many, many things. In order to make the money that I made as a professional, I had to write things that got put on shelves and no one has ever read them. We're talking about 10, 15 scripts, 10, 15 years of my life, paid for my bills, but no one can ever, legally speaking, no one can see that writing. Is that success or failure? So I think the first thing I would say is, if you are dealing with people who are not supportive, it depends on how much it hurts you. You could try saying to them, please stop saying that. If they are the sort of people who think that's a sign of weakness and that therefore they're going to say it more, or they're going to help convince you to, just at a certain point, just stop talking about it with them. If they say it, just go, gotcha, note taken. I will put on my list of things to remember, I'm a bad writer. Can't get better if I don't try. But the main thing is just stop talking to them. You're not going to convince them. Give it up. As long if they're not actually taking your computer away or standing in front of you when you're trying to write and saying stop, it doesn't matter what they say. You do your thing. They don't have to like it. That's my personal opinion on that. I'd like to hear your opinion. Is it a problem if the first half of the story is leaning towards ensemble, but the second half is centered around one protagonist from that early group? That's an interesting question. Is it a problem for who is my... wait, we're not done. Especially if those other characters are still around but are not as important in the story later. I would say here's the problem. There's different levels of problem. Is it a problem for selling a script? Could be, because there's a series of conventions that the industry relies on, and if you don't fit that and this doesn't fit that, It just makes it harder to win them over. It could be the best thing you've ever done, and it could be something that knocks everybody out. But what I would suggest is the other problem, the real actual aesthetic problem, is if somebody has gone into a story and half of the story they're invested in one version, when it changes to another thing, they're likely to feel frustrated or disappointed because they were working on the ensemble. They want to know what happens with the ensemble. So they might feel like, well, I want to know what's happening to the other characters. So the danger that I see for something like that is the possibility that you will mislead your readers and they will feel disappointed or frustrated when you might be able to shift the balance in the first half. If you really want it to be the story of the protagonist, see if you can lower the ensemble a little bit. Give us some indication of who's the most. You can still have the ensemble, just bring up your protagonist a little more, engage them a little more in the other stories, give them a little more time than everyone else. Just make sure that the audience knows whose story that they are following so that they don't feel like, oh, damn, I was following Jerry and now he's not even in the second half. That's my suggestion. Is it possible? Absolutely. Also, it can be something where something happens and we understand why the rest of the ensemble is not important. I don't know what that would be in your story, but I'm saying it's not impossible to steer the audience through that change, and that's okay. But do recognize that industry people have a formula that they want, which is whatever you start with, that's what you go to the end with. So yeah, there's that problem. But if you're not worried about that, or if you're saying, you know what, I'm going to risk it because I think they might think it's so good, the question is, are you confusing the audience as to what your story is about, asking them to get involved in one thing and then dropping that and going to another? That's something that's potentially a problem. If you've got a great way to solve that, not a problem. Like I said, there's ways to build up your main characters in the ensemble so that it feels sort of cool that the others are being stripped away as we focus more and more on them. But you need to make sure that we know a little bit at the beginning who's the center. Bruno Fernandez says, how do you approach biopic? I found a great history book on Bloody Mary. Queen Mary was abandoned by her father. She was so vengeful she had the crown. Had how to adapt to a 90-page script. Yes. Okay. Well, the first thing you want to do is make a list of the things make an outline. Make a list of the things that you want, that you think are good for the story. If it's too many, you have to start to prioritize. You have to start to say, well, this story of vengeance is the center, or the story of, what's the story about? What is your take on Bloody Mary? It is not possible to fully explore every aspect of a character, biographical or not. There's just not enough time in any story. So any story is an artificial focus on a particular aspect or time or quality or take, opinion, vision of the author on this character. To say, I'm going to do a story about Abraham Lincoln, great president of the United States, who also had depression. Now, you can decide to do a story about how he dealt with the Civil War, or you could do a whole story about how he dealt with depression while facing the Civil War. Those two choices will choose which scenes are more important, which events. For instance, if you're doing a biopic, you don't tell necessarily the entire story of their life from childhood to death. You may choose a section. If you are going to tell the whole story, like even something like Gandhi or The Last Emperor, two very sprawling epic biopics, both very good, but you don't spend a lot of time in Gandhi's childhood. You pick him up when he's a law student. You choose which items, which focuses you are going to make. That is how you adapt a biopic. You say, what about this person, which I will know everything, but I'm only going to talk about these particular events because they they focus the revelation on how vengeance is bad or how vengeance is good, whatever it is, or that vengeance is caused by pain. If that's whatever your vision is, cool. But the main thing is to recognize that even if you had 24 hours of nonstop storytelling, you still wouldn't get a whole life into it. A life is more than 24 hours. You're always cutting. You're always choosing. That's how you do it. Additionally, Jeff Messerman says, when I do get the inevitable bad review, I merely remind myself that what I do is not for everyone. I write a fair amount of horror, so, discomfort is my brand. Cool. Yeah, Jeff has got a very legitimate point to fear. How do we deal with fear? If the thing that we fear is criticism, first of all, be prepared. You're gonna get it. Jeff knows he's gonna get it. Everyone gets it. Shakespeare gets it. Christopher Nolan gets it. Everybody gets criticized. Just take it. As you say, remind you, it's not for everyone. People are allowed to have their opinions. You don't have to win everybody over. I have a problem that was caused by you. I am obsessed with P.G. Wodehouse and reading his novels daily now. I understand this problem. I have had it myself. I had it when I was a teenager. For me, I read about 40 of his books. They are extremely enjoyable. I apologize, Feng. All I can say is it will pass eventually. Mostly, I know one guy who just never got past it. It just all he does is try and write like P.G. Wodehouse. P.G. Wodehouse, for those of you who don't know it, is a British comic novelist of the 20th century. He created the character of Jeeves, among many, many others, and he's quite funny and beautiful stylist, and is quite a character and quite an amazing writer. So I'm not going to apologize, except I do apologize. Sorry, Feng. I introduced you to an addictive substance, which is P.G. Wodehouse. Do you think BB competition is worth it? It's free to enter, but unlike others, it doesn't have cash prizes, only a chance to get produced or staffed by the BBC. Well, what do you got to lose? If it's free to enter, all you got to do is fill out the form, send in the work. If you say the only chance is to get produced or get on the staff of the BBC, that's big. That's huge. If all you do is get to meet some people at the BBC, that's still worth it. Yeah, do I think it's worth it? Sure. My general take on competitions is don't count on them, but if you can afford to enter them, and the prize or the reward is something that you value, do it. If you're entering prizes and it's costing you money, don't do it. Unless it's something like the nickel, something like that. Most contests first of all, you're not just statistically, it's like winning the lottery. Second of all, most of them actually don't provide, like if they say, we're going to get you introduced to an agent, that's fine. It's not that great. Most of that is lies. Most of that is a way to get money. So they say that they're going to do things, but they don't. The BBC saying that they're going to introduce you to the staff, that is a worthwhile goal. So why not? Okay. What is melodrama and what is the difference with straight drama? Technically, melodrama tends to be somewhat, I guess you'd say, pop culture. It's a bit unrealistic and therefore a bit exaggerated. And so, for instance, you're asking because I mentioned that The Beast in Me on Netflix is a melodrama. Well, it's a melodrama because it's about a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist who had a trauma in her life and is deeply troubled. A billionaire real estate developer who may have murdered his wife moves in next door. Okay, already we're talking about something which is not going to happen to most people. It is not dealing with the problems of everyday life, the problems of human life. It's dealing with the problems of an extremely exaggerated and entertaining fantasy situation. And fantasy, let's remember, does not have to be spaceships or dragons. Fantasy can be, I'm going to live next door to a billionaire and he's going to ask me to write his autobiography. That's a fantasy. That is it's even if it was realistic, it's not realistically portrayed. Melodrama is, I guess, what you would call high value entertainment drama. And it's a balance. Succession is about billionaires, but I would still say it's something of a drama because its intention was to say, yes, we recognize that these people are not natural. However, within that, their human foibles and suffering is real. The melodrama of something like The Beast in Me, which is supremely entertaining, but it's not going to turn me back onto my own life and say, wow, that's a powerful feeling. I have to remember not to murder my coworkers. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. You could do a dramatic version of this. There's no particular element of a story which defines it as melodrama. It's more of the attitude, which is, I am trying to escape from everyday reality into entertainment, as opposed to I am trying to use entertainment to get to truth and reality. That's my definition. Don't know. Lake Filter is currently mulling over the plans for my next novel, a group of school kids and their growing pains through an academic year. Still unsure how much detail should I plan regarding their studies. I wouldn't overplan, but you got to do what you got to do. DG is reminding me, yes, Damian Lewis, who was so nice to read my work on Amazon and did a fabulous job and is a great actor. Thank you, Lysanda. I really appreciate that. She's talking about it's cool that I worked on the Homeland stuff. Is it possible to write a musical spec script? Absolutely. You have to decide, Celia Jack, are you using music that already exists, or are you planning to write the music or have the music written? Those are all different elements and all possibilities. For instance, you could say, I'm going to write this musical. I'm going to take Cole Porter songs or Nirvana songs. The problem with doing, and I'm going to fit them into my musical script. The problem with that is you have to own the rights to that material. The odds of you getting the rights at an affordable price are nearly zero. So I would say don't write that. Do write, if you want to write a musical but you don't write music, write a musical in which at the musical number part you stop and describe what you think the number will be like. Eventually you will collaborate with a composer and lyricist who will tell you what they need and what they like and what they do in those sections. So yes, you can write a musical without writing the music. And you certainly can write a musical movie. You just have to think, what kind of musical movie am I writing? There's many different styles of musical you have to choose. And then you have to think, how would I describe? You could say, this sounds kind of like Neil Young and it sounds kind of like, Scott Joplin. Whatever it is, you can mention songs, not to say this is that song, to say it sounds like this. And it's about this character saying this. And in the course of it, this character will make this change or whatever. I would suggest you learn about musicals, stage musicals or movie musicals, understand how they operate because they are structured slightly differently than regular non-musical pieces. If you are somebody who either has a composer lyricist or is a composer lyricist and you want to write a musical in which you're going to write the score, the lyrics and the script, just do it. No problem. Okay. Lake Filter is talking about how much he should plan. It's not necessarily their primary goal throughout the novel. Studies are pretty much most of what their activities circle around. There's no clear-cut limit, but what I would say is focus on the action. Focus on the story. Then you can always add the details of the studies, unless the story and the studies are one. In other words, what they're studying and what they're doing, whatever their life issues are. Focus on their lives, focus on the characters, focus on the story and the action. And then once you have that scaffolding created, that structure, it will be easier to decide what you do and don't need in your research. I'm going to say stop asking questions because I'm going to have to go. There was an old Francis Ford Coppola documentary. A producer once said to him that he would only produce his work if it had a sex scene every 15 minutes. Did that ever happen to you? Would you comply? Sure. If I am in that case, he was working with, damn, I'm blanking on the name now. The point is he was working with a producer who was known Roger Corman. He was working with Roger Corman, and Roger Corman said, basically, in order to sell this movie, I know that it must have sex because this is a sexy movie that we're selling. So therefore, it doesn't really matter what else is happening because I'm going to sell it on the sex. Likewise, if you're doing an action movie, they're going to say, we need big action sequences. So the answer is, yeah, very often when you are presented with a project, it's in a genre which has a requirement. If the genre requirement is sexy exploitation scenes, then yes, you have to have them about every 15 minutes. So the question is, can you fit your story into that? Can you live with it? Do you like that genre or feel happy to play with that genre enough to do that? But if you do, why not? I mean, if you're not comfortable doing sex scenes, just don't do the project. That doesn't usually happen that you're working on something and the producer comes in and says, okay, you can do this, but I'm going to take the thing that you were doing and change it into a sex thing. However, Scorsese, when he was doing Who's That Knocking on My Door, his first film was very artsy, very new wave and character driven and small. And he found a distributor. Okay, that's different from a producer. It's a person who says, I will buy this film, but in order to sell it, we do need a sex scene because we can put that into we can talk about how great that is and put it on the poster or whatever. And so Scorsese did add a sex scene, which was a dream. It was a fantasy of the character. And he did it after, like the film was finished, and then they said, okay, throw in this extra scene, we'll do it. And he did that. So the answer is, I don't know. What? Hi, Alessandra. Yay, ordering the book. Thank you. I'm so glad. Hey, Nishaj. Do you like Jimmy McGovern? I wish I knew who Jimmy McGovern is, Orny Man. I truly apologize. Film writing course, how to make film writing. Not sure what you want to know, Sham Major S. Are you looking for a film writing course? If so, I suggest this one. It is available. Description in the link. The best writing class you can get. That's what I would suggest. I feel like I deal with imposter syndrome when I start writing because I can see the whole scene, but then start writing and it's like the flow stops and I freeze up. Start to second guess. Okay, when you get a chance, when this is all done, it's going to show up as a video you can watch. Watch the first 20 minutes. I talk about this, but basically freezing up, imposter syndrome, they are all the same thing. Fear. And you know what I think about fear. If you don't, this is a good place to look. But the other place is I did a whole video called Fear of Writing. And I urge you to look at that. Also, getting stuck or lost. When you get stuck, very often it's fear. So please do look at those videos. I'll try and put a link in the description. I'm making a note when this is done. Okay. What is your second or third biggest fear? Thank you for your time and knowledge you share. You're welcome, LZ Skydog. My second or third biggest fear. Well, honestly, it's mainly that I have a level of fear. It just attaches to everything. I fear social interactions. I fear diseases. I fear global political collapse. Some of these fears are somewhat realistic. The question is, what are you going to do? I mean, are you going to stop global political collapse? I can't. So how do you live with it? That's what I do about my fear. My fears are constantly piling up. I don't know. Actually, fear of artistic failure is no longer on the table, luckily. There's probably a fear of finishing a work in progress, even when it feels relatively okay. Yes, this is true, Leah. Fearing, what will I do when it's done? So you start re-editing it instead of progressing, or you over-edit, or yes, absolutely. Very, very often people out of fear will avoid, they'll start to criticize their own work, even though they liked it before. The main thing about anything if you have something that seems to be fear-based, and almost everything that stops you from writing is, I urge you to, the main thing I say to do is recognize what it is, because it'll feel like you're saying, oh, I just saw that this isn't good enough. But it is. You just added fear to it. And it's important to not always listen to the fear. It's certainly important to check the fear. Is that possible? Is that realistic in any way? But if you've checked it and the truth is you don't know whether it's good or bad, then don't assume the fear is right. Assume that your judgment is right, because that's all you've got. That's all any artist has got is your judgment. Making art is making choices. Thank you, Reflecting Trees. I appreciate that. There is a BFI lecture that Emma Thompson shows all the unproduced screenplays on stage. Even I can't convince people to produce my stuff. Don't be discouraged. That always stays in my mind. Yes, absolutely. I remember I had the opportunity to get to know Robert Benton. Robert Benton wrote Bonnie and Clyde. He wrote part of the first Superman. He then directed Kramer versus Kramer, Places in the Heart. Is a magnificent, fantastic artist. I got to know him. He was working on a project. He had adapting a book, and he could not. He got it all done. This is a multiple Academy Award winning legend of the business at the prime of his career. He had a project. He couldn't quite get the cast that the studios required to do the budget for it, and it fell apart. Thank you, Lauren. I really appreciate that. That's a really cool note. You have no idea how many great artists do not get to do whatever they want. Managers who wanted a band to be the next suffered from being imposters. Members of the band weren't happy for selling out. Always be true to yourself. This is good advice, Michael. Yes. It is important to know that people, imposter syndrome can show up anywhere, including like doctors, all sorts of people. So, all right. We're gonna be winding down here. Hi, JW Steed. It's okay. We all get caught up in stuff. JW Steed says he welcomes criticism because it proves they actually read the scripts. Fair point. Maybe I agree, maybe I not, but I welcome the interaction. If I agree, I change it. If I don't, I ignore it. Okay, this is a very, very healthy way to judge it. I'd rather get a list of things they didn't like than the dreaded "it was fine." This is great advice. Generally, that's all right. Like I try and sort my work out into the I'm doing what I want, I'm doing what they want. And the ones where I'm doing what I want, I say exactly what Steed said, which is, if I hear a note and I think, oh, that's a good point, I should fix that, I fix it. If it's a point that I don't think is right, I don't. That's what being a writer is. If you are working for people and your job is to make them happy, whatever they say, you have to do. All right. Sonia, I was afraid I'll confuse the audience when I change from ensemble to single protagonist, but I made sure in the first part that the reader knows she's going to be very important later. Then you're good. You're good to go, Sonia. Fear not. See how it goes. Okay. How much pull does a junior executive have? Not a lot. Oops. Not a lot at all. Hold on. Let me see if I can. Okay. The answer is, how much pull does a junior executive have? It depends on the company. Some companies, the upper executives may trust and like their junior executives a great deal, and therefore they'll take them very seriously. Others are like, no, just run and get me coffee. No way to know. I always think about the ending of Gossip Girl because it never explained how Nate became a mayoral candidate 5 years later. I always wanted to explore that story. Is it legal to write a Nate spinoff? It is not legal. But there is such a thing as, Allison, fan fiction. If you are planning to just write a Nate spinoff and then just put it on the internet in a fan fiction website, like a Gossip Girl site, or make a Substack or your own website, which is like, this is my Gossip Girl fan fiction, you'll probably be fine. Legally, you're not going to be able to sell it to a company that doesn't own Gossip Girl. However, there is such a thing as fan fiction, and if you are satisfied to not sell it, but simply to put it out there, fan fiction is usually tolerated. Lake Filter says, don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Campos, Roberta, have you heard of the story of a middle-aged woman is so angry that her husband cheated on her, scribbled an angry revenge thriller script in one night and sold it to become a professional? No, I didn't. That's cool. These things do happen. It is possible to just blurt out something, and if it fits into a genre and if it has a certain vibe because you just happen to be working in a thing where you naturally can speak the language of the art form, which can happen if you've watched a lot of movies, absolutely possible. Is it important to watch recent movies? I think I only saw a handful of movies this year. If you're trying to write contemporary movies, then yes, but it's not essential. I would think it's worth trying. My feeling is it's always good to watch whatever you can, but it is not necessary unless you are saying, I am trying to understand the marketplace. So I need to see what's coming out, see how that's done, which is a legitimate activity. Yes. But with you, Michael, I think you're probably just, you're writing what you think is good. And that's mostly influenced by old movies. You don't have to. I would. A lot of recent movies are really good. I feel it would be a much more exciting story if Gossip Girl is the website that spread private life secrets about political figures instead of which student is sleeping with who. I want to write it. Once again, if you want to do fan fiction, Gossip Girl or otherwise, you can. Just recognize that fan fiction does not enter the professional marketplace, the commercial marketplace, because there are copyrights involved. But if you just want to write it because you want to imagine it and get it down and share it with the other people who think it's cool in fan fiction, do it. And Lake Filter says, thank you for the amazing stream. You are very welcome. You know what, everybody? I'm going to be heading out, but I am super, super happy to have talked to you. I love your questions. I thank you. Please go subscribe to my Substack. You will be glad you did. I'm going to be putting stuff on there increasingly, and that's going to be my home in many ways. So sign up. That's where I'll be. That's where you can direct message me. Okay, so until the next week, go write something.